With British politics starting to resemble the closing scene of a Tarantino movie, and with debate often descending into mere politics combined with a kind of ill-informed pub chat, understandably bewildering normal members of the public, in this series of 5 short videos I will try to set out briefly where we are with Brexit. So what are we trying to achieve? In a word, freedom. And freedom means self-government. Freedom is the fountainhead of prosperity, virtue and dignity. It is a thing worth striving for. We shouldn't need to refight the referendum campaign, but as every day goes past, I am more convinced we made the right choice. Leave one, and now we must deliver the result. That means that we must take back control of our laws, take back control of our money, take back control of our immigration policy, wherever people may come from, and take back control of our international trade policy. Now, controlling our laws and our trade policy means controlling our domestic regulations. The UK is a major G7 economy which has the chance to embrace independent trade and regulatory policy for the first time in 40 years. This is unprecedented and could lead to huge opportunities for the UK and the world. The global trading system is in crisis. No significant global round of negotiations has been completed since '94. Key indicators like global industrial output have been stalled since before the financial crisis. Global trade as a percentage of global GDP has dipped, and global trade growth stalled in 2015 in an unprecedented fashion. The list goes on. The EU and global regulatory systems are also moving in the wrong direction, becoming more prescriptive, anti-competitive and harmful to welfare. As an independent country, the UK would be in a position to help resolve these problems. Countries like Japan are eager for us to join in a new progressive trading arrangement. To have the necessary independent trade policy and to be a credible trade partner, we need to control our tariffs together with taking control over our domestic regulations. That means we cannot be in either the EU's customs union or the EU's internal market, that is the European Economic Area or EEA. So, to help solve the world's trade problems, we need to cleanly leave the European Union, not leave in name only or ask the question again. To find out more, please download Plan A+. There's a link in the description of this video, and please watch the rest of the series. The position today is that we are within 6 months of the end of our notice period for leaving the European Union. We entered that notice period after Parliament passed the European Union Notification of Withdrawal Act 2017. With that authority, the Prime Minister started a process in treaty law which means we leave the EU on 29th of March, deal or no deal, unless there is mutual agreement to extend. Any extension would be a matter of severe disagreement in our Parliament, even if it were agreed with the European Union. Before we leave, the government would like to negotiate a withdrawal agreement and to legislate for that agreement in UK law. The withdrawal agreement would cover separation issues and an implementation period in which we are outside the EU while changing little so we can negotiate new treaties. At the same time, the government would like to negotiate a political statement on our future relationship. There are several points of fierce controversy. One is a proposed backstop relating to the Irish border. The EU proposes to break up the UK by keeping Northern Ireland within the EU's internal market and customs union. The EU is not entitled to split the UK. The Prime Minister and Parliament could not agree to it. This backstop is therefore a profound risk to agreeing a deal at all. The other fierce controversies mostly relate to our future relationship. Within the EU's precedents, there are three ways in principle, to continue our trading relationship with the EU after we leave. We could remain in the EU's customs union plus the EU's internal market. That would leave us a rule taker with no control over international trade policy and negligible control of domestic economic regulation across a wide field, with no control over migration from other countries in the European Union and the European Economic Area. The Chequers Agreement rightly rejects this option. Or we could enter into a conventional advanced modern free trade agreement with zero tariffs on all sectors and including services, plus a range of supplementary agreements. This was the offer from EU Council President Tusk in March, which has been repeated recently. Without a deal, we could trade on WTO terms, which is nothing to be afraid of, but which could be less advantageous, especially for our European partners, who would suffer higher tariffs. In both deal scenarios, we should continue security cooperation, participation in programmes relating to research and innovation, culture and education. And we should deal with potentially absurd risks like any threat to uninterrupted aviation or data exchange, recognition of driving licenses and other obvious good things in our mutual interests. To be clear, within its legal framework, the EU is capable of negotiating two kinds of deal, either the internal market plus the customs union or a free trade agreement. The EU is offering us a free trade agreement because it is the option which meets our requirements to become a normal independent country. To be in the single dynamic and homogeneous legal area of the internal market through the European Economic Area, or EEA, would not be taking back control. It would not be a Brexit worth having. Finally, today no EEA country is in the EU's customs union, because they, together with Switzerland, which has restrictive bilateral agreements with the EU, are in EFTA, the European Free Trade Association. To be in the EEA plus the customs union would be a novel legal construct. EFTA and the EEA have been conveyors to full EU membership. Neither is suitable for us as a member state leaving. There's been a great deal of ill-informed pub chat about all this. If you want to know more about how European countries relate to each other, do have a look at this great diagram from Bloomberg, and there is a link in the description. The government's proposal, into which the cabinet was bounced at Chequers, tries to steer a course between two precedents which the EU understands. It tries to deliver something like the customs union, so that customs declarations don't have to be made, plus something like the EEA, so goods rules are harmonised. Unfortunately, that Chequers proposal would close off all possibility of economic benefit by preventing a transformation of trade policy and preventing improvements to regulation in a pro-competitive, welfare-enhancing direction. Under a Chequers-based deal, we wouldn't control our domestic regulation or our trade policy in any meaningful sense. The EU can't agree to Chequers. We can be in the customs union or not, we can be in the EEA or not, but we can't have a novel part membership of both. So that's why the EU has offered us an advanced free trade agreement styled Canada+++. It would cover all sectors with no tariffs and no quantitative restrictions. Under World Trade Organization law, it should introduce no new non-tariff barriers either, because our relevant laws are currently the same. In order to slowly diverge over time, what we would need in that advanced FTA is what is called a regulatory coherence chapter, and one is included in this plan, Plan A+. The government is also negotiating on the so-called backstop. There are fears that it could open the possibility of leaving the whole UK in the customs union and the internal market. which would overturn the result for practical purposes. Now, the EU is not entitled to constrain UK trade policy and domestic regulation, and an all-UK customs union and internal market arrangement, even if supposedly temporary, would take away the EU's incentive to negotiate. We would be in those arrangements indefinitely, and that would suit the EU. The UK would be a rule taker forever, locked in a decaying orbit as a regulatory satellite around the EU. Therefore, any backstop which threatens the future of either the Union of the UK or our independent trade and regulatory policy would be unacceptable. There are two reasons why the UK has not just got on with agreeing a world-class free trade agreement. The first is that the EU is only offering an FTA for Great Britain, that is, the UK excluding Northern Ireland, but we cannot allow the UK to be broken up. The EU is limiting its offer on the face of it because of concern for the land border with Ireland. Some of us believe these problems can be solved within the existing legal and operational frameworks of the EU and UK. This ERG paper sets out how. It is the key to unlocking the prison into which these negotiations have fallen. The EU has accepted that the solutions put forward in our ERG paper and in the Plan A Plus proposal do protect the EU single market. They sought to apply those proposals, or proposals of those kind, to their proposed and unacceptable border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. If we marry together proposals for a free trade agreement with jointly acceptable proposals for a free-flowing border in Northern Ireland, we should have a good deal that works for all sides. However, there is a second problem. It may be that powerful forces within the government are determined to have a high alignment Brexit, something like the EEA plus something like the customs union. Now, that might be because they are badly advised about the cost of customs and the potential for new non-tariff barriers. It might be because they do not want to leave the European Union and wish to create the conditions to rejoin it later, with all that would mean: no rebate, adopting the euro, and so on. It might be because of secret guarantees wrongly given to the car industry that nothing would change as we left the EU. There is some evidence for each of these possibilities, but what is for sure is that the government's Chequers plan does not deliver a meaningful Brexit, and the EU says it does not work. The UK made a democratic decision to leave and become an independent country. The EU is not entitled to split the UK, and it is not entitled to constrain how we regulate our economy and govern ourselves after we leave. If the UK faces either possibility, then we must leave with nothing agreed, and we must be unafraid to do so. But that would not be the optimal solution, especially for Ireland. That's why it is time to accept practical arrangements on the Irish border for the important but small proportion of trade which is north-south, and to make an advanced free trade agreement work for the whole UK. The alternative is to have practical arrangements in Ireland with no deal. Many of us believe the UK is on the cusp of transforming world trade and domestic regulation for the benefit not only of the tens of millions of people in the UK, but potentially for the billions of people around the world. If you want to know more, please download Plan A Plus and ask your MP to stand up for a hopeful, positive and open Brexit which can deliver a better future for all of us.